All right, kiddos. So this semester in biology is going to be all about human anatomy. So there's going to be a lot of vocab, but it is very interesting topic. So the chapters go by body systems. For this first chapter, it is the skeletal, muscular, and integumentary systems. Integumentary is skin, hair, and nails. I'm assuming you understand skeletal and muscular. But the topic for today's video is the human body plan. All right, so first thing are body tissues. No, not that kind of tissue. Tissues are cells that work together to perform a function. If you remember, we haven't talked about it yet, there's a hierarchy to how you are organized. So at the very basic level, you have cells. Cells come together to form tissues. Tissues form organs. Organs form organ systems, and organ systems make up the body. Tissues are all similar in structure, and there are 4 types of tissues for the human body, only 4. That is muscle, nervous, epithelial, and connective tissue. So let's start with muscle. Muscles are defined by the fact that they can contract, and their groups are coordinated like those super fun aerobic dudes down there. Now, there are 3 types of muscle. We have skeletal muscle, which you find in the bones of the trunk, limbs, and the face. If you're wondering what the trunk is, imagine if you have no head, no arms, and no legs. What's left is the trunk. Skeletal muscles are considered voluntary muscles, which means they are under your conscious control, which means consciously you decide to move parts of your body. It's not automatic. Now, this is a micrograph or a picture from a microscope of skeletal muscle. It has a very unique appearance. It's called striated. Striated means stripes. You can see those bands of light and dark. There's a reason for that, which I'll get into in the section when we talk about the muscle system. The second kind of muscle is smooth muscle. Again, you can see the micrograph from the bottom. You can see it looks kind of wavy. These are involuntary muscles. They are under subconscious control. So your brain coordinates the contraction of smooth muscles automatically. You don't have to think about it. So if you imagine, let's say your digestive system, the digestive system has to have smooth muscle to move the food through your body. And thank God we don't actually have to think about contracting those muscles. Can you imagine if you had like period 6 after lunch and you're like, I can't listen to you right now because I'm like busy moving the food through my digestive system? No, it happens automatically. And the third type of muscle is cardiac. A lot of what you're going to hear in the vocabulary relates to medical terms, because again, all this vocabulary is based in Greek and Latin origins. So cardiac or cardio is referring to the heart. Next up, excuse me, is nervous tissue. Sorry. Okay, the cells in nervous tissue have a specific name. They're called neurons. Oh, I forgot to mention that all of the new vocab is going to be in red, trying to make it easy to identify. Anyway, neurons are cells of the nervous tissue. Their function is to receive and transmit messages as electrical impulses. You find nervous tissue in the brain, in the spinal cord, and all of the nerves, the nerve network that goes through your body. Also in your sensory organs, like your ears, your eyes, your nose, and on your skin. The nervous system senses changes in your internal and external environment and interprets your sensory information and then cause your body to move in response to that sensory information, like touching a hot stove. The third kind of tissue is epithelial tissue. This is anything that covers or lines both the internal and external surfaces of your body. So On the outside, I want you to think about skin. Skin is the largest organ of your body, if you didn't know that. Of all the organs, your liver, your stomach, your heart, blah, 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 your skin is the largest organ. It is part of multiple body systems. It's part of the integumentary system, but it's also part of the excretory system because you excrete sweat. And I got a dry throat. So anything that lines the inside and the outside of your body, because everything on the inside is also lined with epithelial tissue. These tissues are tightly bound together, and they vary in their thickness and in their arrangements. It really just depends on where in the body. So you don't have to know these. If you want to go to medical school, then you'll start to learn these different types of epithelial tissues. But just to give you an example, you've got simple squamous, which is your skin, and that's because it's really flat. And then you got cuboidal and columnar. This basically describes the shape of it. And you can see you got simple, 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 stratified, which means it's like in columns or in layers. But like I said, you can learn about that if and when you go to medical school. So here's an example of simple squamous, and squamous just means that it's flat. Epithelium that lines the inside of your blood vessels. So it's important to have flattened, thin cells lining the blood vessels because that's where gas exchange and nutrient exchange and waste exchange, just all kinds of exchanges, that's where exchanges happen between your body tissues and the blood. So this area here in the middle, that's the inside of the blood vessel. So you're looking at, this is the lining, right? So everything in your body is lined on the inside and on the outside. I cannot talk today. So the shape is going to be based on function, which is what I've been telling you since grade 10, form follows function. In biology, everything is shaped and structured in such a way that it makes their function more efficient. Another example of specialized epithelial cells is in your trachea. That's in basically your air tube that goes from your mouth, your nose and your mouth down to your lungs. You can see that here. That's your trachea. You can actually feel it. Sorry, it's gonna because my voice box is there. You can actually feel rings of cartilage. You can see the tracheal cartilage here is rings. Cartilage is a structure that's like basically your ears are made of cartilage. It's flexible, but it gives shape. And so what makes the epithelial tissue in your trachea special is that it's lined with cilia. You can see here. And you should remember cilia from last year, chapter 4 on the cell organelles. Cilia are the short hair-like extensions. And the reason we have that is, like my throat is trying to tell me today, it traps particles or dust or things from the air. And then when you also have mucus there, and then when it's just irritating, you cough. When you cough, you push all of that debris up to your mouth, and then what do? You swallow it. So it goes down to the stomach, and if there are any microorganisms or pathogens in the air, they get destroyed by stomach acid. This is a cross-section of skin, and you can see, just like I said in the video, every minute you shed 500,000 skin cells, and this is why. So the dark purple color here, I'll talk more about, oh, that's behind my video. Up to here, this is the boundary between the epidermis and the dermis. I'm going to talk about that more in the last section on the integumentary system, but this is the living part of your skin. If you only cut into the epidermis, you won't bleed because there's no blood vessels there. But if you cut down into the dermis, you will bleed because that's where the blood vessels are. So those are the, those really flaky layers that you see on the top. Those are the ones that are sloughed off. This is the word that's used in regards to to shedding skin. Slough or sloughed. It means to shed. irritating. So you slough skin or shed skin, and that's not too concerning because it's replaced by cells underneath. So all of these cells get pushed up more and more. I'm gonna roll today. Okay, and last is connective tissue. This is going to bind, support, and protect the structures in the body. It is the most abundant and really diverse type of tissue. These are examples of different types of connective tissue. You wouldn't imagine that bone and cartilage are connective tissues, but they are because they're not part of the other three. So you've got bone, cartilage, tendons, fat, and blood. Okay, so connective tissue is characterized by cells that are embedded in what's called the intercellular matrix. And no, not that matrix. The intercellular matrix, remember inter means between two different ones. So it's basically the space between two different cells. Now, this matrix can be solid, semi-solid, or liquid. Bone is in a hard crystalline matrix that contains calcium. This is why it's important to get calcium, especially for females, because as we age, we lose bone density, and that results in something called osteoporosis, which I'll talk about in the section on the skeletal system. Cartilage, tendons, and fat are surrounded by a semi-solid fibrous mix. And then finally, blood obviously is a liquid matrix. All right, so from tissues, remember we go from cells, cells combine to form tissues, tissues combine to form organs, not that kind of organ. An organ is various tissues working together to carry out a specific function, and they usually do not function alone. And finally, organs come together to form organ systems. The boundaries of the organ systems is not well defined. For example, the pancreas is an organ that creates juices that aid digestion. In fact, most of the digestion that occurs in the small intestine is because of pancreatic juice. But it also has a collection of cells that produce important hormones, insulin and glucagon, which control your level of blood sugar. This is any kind of abnormality in those cells in the pancreas create diabetes. But the important thing to remember, as always, is that everything works together. Next, body cavities. These are empty spaces that contain organs and organ systems. The function of a body cavity is to protect the organs from injury, but it also has to allow for expansion and contraction. There are 5 body cavities. The first one is the cranial cavity. Again, cranial or cranium means brain. You have the spinal cavity, which contains the spinal cord. You have the thoracic cavity here. So thoracic cavity is here. This contains the heart, the esophagus, and the respiratory organs. Then in between the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity is the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a muscle that's kind of convex, yeah. And the contraction of the diaphragm is what allows you to breathe. Again, talking about that in a later section. Actually, it's in the next chapter. And then you have the abdominal cavity, which contains the organs of digestion. And finally, you have the pelvic cavity, which contains the reproductive and excretory system. So that in general lays out a basic body plan for human beings. After this, then we go into the skeletal system and looking at bone formation and structure.